Because of the shared history between the United States and Mexico, Kansas is home to both immigrant Mexicans and people of Mexican heritage. Tina de la Rosa, the former director of Kansas's Hispanic and Latino Affairs Office, shares insights with us about Mexican culture.
Well, I was born in Kansas, but my parents are of Mexican descent. My dad is from Allende, Coahuila, Mexico, and my mom was born in southern Texas, but raised mostly in the borderline between Brownsville, Texas, and Matamoros, Tamaulipas, where she lived most of her young life and married my dad when she was in her early 20s. They migrated to Kansas in search of work, like a lot of migrant farm workers did then and still do today. My mom was a U.S. citizen since she was born in southern Texas, so back then the legalization process was not as tedious as it is now. And she says that at the border, she legalized my dad and my two older siblings the day they crossed. And so that was back in '62. And I was born then in southern Kansas, where they came to because there was family there, and found work and settled. And so I was born in Kansas, the first of my other four siblings. There are several. When I think of perhaps values within the families, I feel we're a lot more respectful. We acknowledge elders and strangers with respect. We know when to be quiet and not overspeak an adult or wait our turn. We are more reserved in that sense too. We are constantly reminded of if you act out, you shame not yourself but the whole family. And if we're somewhat disconnected with the family, or we recognize ourselves as a group of people who have pride, the Hispanic community in general, we also reflect bad on our community. I believe we're much more familial, we're much more reserved. We expect certain things from our peers and from the opposite sex in terms of respecting us as a lady, as a friend. We're hardworking, we're very devoted. We're very devoted to our family, to our partners, and we like working in teams like sisters with sisters, not sisters against sisters. We weren't the first ones to raise our hands perhaps in the classroom because we weren't the ones that were allowed to join Girl Scouts. We weren't the ones to allow to be participating in 4-H or what have you. Anything foreign like that was hard to explain to our parents. So we perhaps were a little bit more reserved when raising the hand, participating in a leadership role in school because we weren't prepped that way. We were prepped at home to be good caregivers, to be responsible citizens, to be responsible older siblings. And when it came time to compete perhaps with some of them, our mainstream schoolmates, it was a little bit more difficult. What I would like teachers to know about working with Mexican national students is that they come from all different backgrounds. They come from all different socioeconomic statuses. Their parents, some might be very educated, others might not. And that they too are here to learn and be part of the classroom setting. They'll be more shy, they'll be more timid if they don't speak the language. If their parents aren't as active with the school, they're not going to know whether or not they can participate in how to explain a field trip to a university, a field trip to the zoo. They might not know how to explain that to the parents because they won't know, they might not have ever experienced that somewhere else. And I think it's important that the teachers know to provide information about certain outings or important meetings in Spanish and in English. I believe it's important to seek an interpreter to be present at some of these very important meetings that inform the parents of school policies, of rules, of changes, of health issues, what have you. It's okay to ask questions. The teachers need not be worried about being too personal. They're new, you're new to them. When strangers meet, you ask questions. And you ask questions out of the kindness of your heart just as an individual. Where are you from? What do you do? Did you go to school or whatever? It makes the student feel comfortable that they're able to share something about them that is for real, that they took pride in. when they're somewhat forced to forget that, because you're in Kansas now. You need to speak English. You can't be speaking Spanish, not even in recess with your friends. That's not right. That's who they are. That's where their comfort zone is. And until we as educators make them feel more comfortable with their new school, then we will, by that time, feel okay with speaking in English. And because they might be mocked or ridiculed because they have an accent, because they don't know the language completely yet. So why would they want to raise their hand and say something in broken English and fear to be mocked? When we were enrolling, I remember the the secretary's name was Mrs. White. She asked my mom what my name was, and she said Ernestina. And she looked at her and frowned and shook her pen and said Ernestine. And my mom said Ernestina. And of course I was understanding both because I was bilingual. And then Mrs. White said, it'll be Ernestine. Here it'll be Ernestine. And then I look at my mom and I said, Ma, no Ernestine, Ernestina. Y si no Ernestina, Tina. Porque así me dicen en la casa. And Mrs. White had already started filling out the form and wrote it down as Ernestine. And I looked at her, and I guess I must have given her a dirty look, because my mother says, cállate, no digas nada, ella es la que sabe. She wanted to shut me up because I should be submissive as a little Mexican girl. And the lady behind the desk with the pen in her hand was the person in the know. A lot of our parents feel that way still. They fear questioning even their kid's name or something so simple like that, because they're not the educated, they're not the one with the pen in the hand, they're not the one sitting behind the desk. And so you don't question people of authority, or especially educators, because contrary to some belief, a lot of Mexican national families do value education in a way that I think sometimes hurts them, like in our case, in my case. I still remember the dress Mrs. White was wearing and the smell of her perfume that I didn't like, and her attitude. And I became Ernestine, and I hated the name. And I believe that still happens. As Americanos, it's easier for us to change Martinez from Martinez, or even trying to say it correctly. It's easier to say Marcos instead of Marcos. It's just easier, and we get away with it because, after all, like they say, you're in America and you're supposed to speak in English. Some names are difficult to say, I know, but out of respect for the individual and for what little that one student can hang on to that they know is theirs, such as their name. They're in a foreign country. They don't speak the language. The school system is totally different. And they have to prove themselves and do well for themselves, their family, and the school. And not to recognize their name or even attempt to say it correctly is very hurtful. It's very hurtful and demeaning, I think. The majority of Mexican nationals do value education, but several of our younger parents have not had much formal education because of the cost factor. Not everybody can afford to go to school in Mexico. Some students, some families, they might send them up to the 4th, 5th grade, such as was my mom's case. And only those who can pay for private will go to private, and the public school it's a struggle. Many Hispanic families that come are here for 6 months, 8 months. Their kids have been in school, and they keep in touch, of course, with their families back in Mexico. And they're used to a routine of the scheduling that the school system has in Mexico. Their calendar year for school is much different than ours. They might go, depending if it's public or private, a few months, and then their breaks are more often than we just have one once a year in the summer, in May. And so they're used to having that free time to spend with family, travel, or get an extra job, or it's not an issue. When they come here and our scheduling is much different than what they're used to, and December comes, and that's when there's at least a week of school that the kids can be gone for, and they've already been here for a year, and so they've earned that vacation time, the head of household, and they plan to go home for Mexico, but they like to extend their vacation from 1 week to 2 to 3. This makes it somewhat uncomfortable for the educators who says, well, they're going to miss a lot of school. How are they going to catch up? That they're struggling already as it is. Do they not care? Yes, they care. But first of all, their main concern, their main love, and what they miss is family back home. And they don't want to go without their children. They don't want to leave them here with somebody else for them to go to school. It's not that they don't value education. It's just that in their mindset, they're still like, they'll catch up because we've done this in Mexico. You know, they're not going to miss out that much. You know, they'll be okay. And if they take homework home with them now, they'll have it done and be able to turn it in by the time we get back. And I think that parents need to be educated on important details such as that. The educators should take time to inform them that this could really hurt your child if they're not here. You know, we've got this work plan and we'd like to work on it together as a team. We understand you miss family and you want to go home, but really, in order for them to stay with where they're at and build upon that, we need you to work with us. I think, you know, whether that changes the mind of the parent or not, whether they stay just for the 1 week or they extend their vacation on their own, I don't know. But I think that it would be beneficial to the educators to educate them about that from the beginning so that the parents know what they're walking into and that there is a difference between both school in Mexico and in the United States. And it's a part of their adaptation to their new world. It might be a bit of a struggle for a while, but because they do value education, and that's the way it should be presented, because we know you do value education, this is what our policies are. Not assume that they don't just because they don't understand it. That's a bad assumption. My family has always been very patriotic about that and taught to be very grateful for the blessings that we've received here in the United States.